or Messenger or whatever it is. So there's this concept that I created about a year and a half ago called emotional alchemy. It's how to hack our energy, right? And the only five neurotransmitters and hormones you need to remember is number one, dopamine, number two, endorphins, number three, serotonin, number four, oxytocin, and number five, I'll leave that to the end and leave an open loop, right? So that's another way to generate curiosity is open loops. Oh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen, right? In marketing and relationships and all that stuff. So number one, dopamine. It's the pursuit of pleasure molecule. It's not actually the pleasure molecule, right? So when we're telling stories, we're wondering the person listening is wondering what's going to happen next, what's going to happen next, what's going to happen next. That's why storytellers run the world. Like Russell Brunson, almost $1 billion company, it's probably less now, but amazing storyteller because he owns people's attention, right? He hacks their focus, their attention. But also internally, when we have a big vision for our life that's stemming from our values, we're pursuing that pleasure, right? We have a big vision for our life, so we're naturally producing more dopamine in our system. When we visualize, we create dopamine in our system, right? More motivation, more focus, right? But there's a caveat to this. So with dopamine, if we're getting a lot of cheap dopamine hits with alcohol, with scrolling social media, with porn, with those cheap with shitty foods and high sugar, then our dopamine baseline will be higher. So it'll be harder for us to stay focused and stay motivated, right? For example, 2018, I burned out hardcore. I had no focus, no motivation at the end of 2018. Yes, I built my business. I was chugging a shit ton of coffee, and I was doing other things with cheap dopamine hits, and I totally burnt out at the end of 2018. Then I went to Deer Park Monastery, and I had no caffeine for a week, hung out with monks, and meditated the whole time. It lowered my dopamine baseline. So after coming out of there, I had more motivation and more focus, and I tripled my business the following year, right? And yeah, sometimes we need those intense like stops, and we can do this just on like weekends to reset our dopamine levels with just saying, this is a surrender day, right? This is a let go day. This is get out of the head, back into the body. No cheap dopamine hits. And I know I'm going to feel a little bit lower energy, but it's going to reset my dopamine baseline a little bit. Longer it goes, the more lower our dopamine baseline goes, and then it kind of has lasting effects, but you can just start on a weekend day of just boom, totally getting out of it, right? So you have dopamine. Storytelling, great way to release dopamine in others, right? Talking about the vision of the future with other people. I remember when Arlie and I were first starting dating, and we were out on a dinner date, and she invited me to a Rufus Du Sol concert in 3 weeks. And I remember this hit of like, that sounds amazing. I definitely want to go. It was a dopamine spike of she was painting a vision of the future, right? And it made us, boom, more connected, right? Does that make sense with dopamine and how to use it? Cool. So next, we have endorphins. It's the painkiller molecule, like just kind of a total reset molecule for the body and for the system, right? Exercise, great way to release endorphins and to reset our nervous system. In social interactions, humor, throwing jokes out there. If things get really stale, then you can throw a random joke out there. You'll probably hear me say penis jokes and that sort of stuff on these calls, because I'll feel like, oh, it's getting a little stale. I need to throw something out there to reset the energy. Also, Dr. DeMartini was great at this at the Breakthrough Experience, where he had some creepy ass jokes about like, yeah, just like young women and stuff, but people would laugh and it would reset the energy because his content was so dense, right? So also I used to use this all the time when I was dating a lot. It's just like, oh, this is getting really dense. How can we laugh a little bit? And I would ask them about what's your most embarrassing story? And sometimes they would have a good one, sometimes not. And then I had a really good story for embarrassing story that would always get them to laugh, right? It would reset that, right? Yeah, exercise, easiest way to release more endorphins, all of that stuff. Does that make sense for endorphins? Cool. Then oxytocin, it's the love connection chemical, right? When a woman has a baby, she releases a shit ton of oxytocin in her system. The baby releases a shit ton of oxytocin in their system, and they're so connected because of that. Like it's a chemical reaction from that. So how do we release oxytocin into our system? So feelings of gratitude, thoughts of gratitude. When we do that and spend the time to do that, we feel more connected to ourselves. When we're thinking about what we're grateful for in other people, we feel more connected to them. Kind of what we brought up earlier, Ken, which is if we want to shift and change our energy around somebody, it's feelings of gratitude and reassociating those synaptic connections, right? Also, stories of empathy, really easy way to release more oxytocin within ourselves and other people. So when we're with our soul family or we're going super deep with somebody in a conversation and be like, oh, I'm like, this is what's going on in my life, struggling with this, yada, yada, yada. Somebody's really opening up. We feel more connected with them. It's the oxytocin that's being produced, right? In a marketing context, that's why we have our origin story, right? I was struggling with this, I overcame, these are lessons I have learned, yada, yada, yada. They're producing more oxytocin in their system, feeling more connected with you or your business, right? So oxytocin, makes sense? Cool. Also, you can trigger this by asking questions. So what do you love most about X, right? It's a love connection chemical. With any of these chemicals, tell me the vision of your future, dopamine, right? Tell me a funny story, endorphins, right? What do you love most about X, oxytocin? What's something that you've struggled with and have overcome, oxytocin, right? So we can trigger these things with questions as well, right? Serotonin is the happy, joy, calm molecule. So when we're in focused awareness and open awareness with meditation, breath work, that sort of stuff, we're releasing a lot of serotonin into our system and decreasing the cortisol. What happens in the brain is we stop operating out of the amygdala and start operating more from the prefrontal cortex that regulates our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. In our amygdala, that is the fear portion of our brain. Right? If we have a lot of running thoughts, we're just operating from the amygdala. And we want to increase our serotonin levels and decrease our cortisol levels. And when we increase our serotonin levels, breath work is a great way to do it, meditation, that sort of stuff, and then that will naturally decrease our cortisol levels. Those moments that you've been with people and you didn't even have to say any words and you knew exactly what they were thinking, like you have had all of these chemicals together, right? And had that connection. Does that make sense with serotonin? Cool. Last but not least, in emotional alchemy, cortisol. If somebody's just talking a lot of negative shit, it's going to release a lot of stress and a lot of cortisol in our systems, right? If we're drinking coffee all the time and just chugging, it releases cortisol and dopamine. So having a healthy balance of that with caffeine, with coffee is great. Doing too much of it will burn out the adrenals, have us operate way too much from our amygdala, and will be our false self from the overproduction of cortisol. Like if we have constant running thoughts, negative thoughts, then it will produce more cortisol and stress in our system and get us to be our inauthentic self from our amygdala, right? So in like loud noise, boom, if I clap there, or if I trip over like a step or a stick or something, cortisol in the system. It's keep me alive, right? But we can offset that. Whenever I trip over something, I just go boom. And then instead of having these running thoughts through the rest of my day because I didn't offset that emotion, then I get to be more present in the moment and choose my next thought, right? Instead of being stressed out around tripping over that thing, for example, right? So that's emotional alchemy in a nutshell. Those 5 neurotransmitters and hormones and how to use them. So, cool. Sweet. What were the big takeaways, guys?
That was insane. That was nuts. That's a whole, I said it in the chat, but that's a whole different level of emotional intelligence right there.
Thanks, dude. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Man's breaking down chemical components into, dude, that's nuts. Can you make like, that's on record, right?
Yeah, it's recorded.
Can you put that into like a clip or something like that so I can rewatch that?
Yeah, Lauren, can you have Kenneth clip out this training? Cool.
Yeah, that would be amazing, actually, if you could do that. Love it.
Cool. Sweet. Yeah. And then life becomes more of a game instead of like taking it so seriously. It's like, oh, I have a lot of stress, cortisol. Cool. Accepting it. Sweet. What do I want to do next about it? Cool. Let me do some breath work, release some serotonin, get out my amygdala back to my prefrontal cortex. Sweet. Let me think about the vision of the future and ultimately where I want to go and release more dopamine because we get what we are, not what we want. Like attracts like. So when we're in an optimal state, we'll attract more of those people that are like that, right? So, cool. Other takeaways, guys?
Andrew, was the breath when you're saying the fight or flight instinct, was that the pattern interrupt? So you're choosing something, being conscious and choosing something different?
Yes. So the breath, boom. The breath, when we trip over that thing, boom, thinking will, all that stuff. Oh God, blah, 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 right? And then the breath will help us move to focused awareness, to put space between our thoughts. So even just a breath hold, like that. Now we're focused on our breath and not our thoughts. We're focused on our body, not our brain and our thoughts just running, right? So create that pattern interrupt and boom, we can move to focus awareness and live our life by design instead of by default, by putting that pause between the thought and setting a new intention, right? Or saying, hey, thank you, stick, for letting me pause for a second, right? Gratitude.
Or better yet, if it's a person, you catch yourself before you can't take something back.
Exactly, man. Yeah. Cool. One more takeaway from you guys? Jesse?
Yeah, I loved that you said that, if you are overthinking yourself, you attract what that situation is. So it makes total sense. The past like week or two, I've been operating in like a stress state, and I've just not been able to get out of that spiral of stress. And I've been trying to figure out, okay, how can I incorporate a good routine where I wake up in the morning and do breath work and then meditation, and the consistency is just like sometimes I'll do it and then I'll forget the next day. So I'm just trying to understand that part, but you really conceptualized it perfectly. So thank you again for that.
Thanks, man. Yeah. And just acceptance. Like, I'll fall off the horse. I have some days where I just call them fuck it days, where I'm just like, nothing's getting done. The emotional state is really low. I stayed up until 3 last night because I didn't do my energy rituals throughout the day. Fuck it. Life isn't short. It's the longest thing we've ever done, the longest thing we will ever will do. I think this will go perfectly into the next step, which will probably be the most powerful thing on this call. If you guys haven't dove into Hermeticism, I highly recommend it. All the ancient religions are built off of Hermeticism. It's a 5,000-year-old way of thinking. a kind of watered down concept, but easy to conceptualize around Hermeticism is from the book The Kabbalion, which was written in the 1920s. It's on Audible. It's on Amazon if you want to get the hard copy. But they have the 7 principles of the universe, or the 7 laws of the universe. And one of the core laws that you can add into your life is the law or the principle of gender. That everything has a masculine and a feminine inside of it, right? And I have the theory, the philosophy that when we balance our masculine and feminine inside of us, that's when we're a whole and complete human being. It's been just butchered in today's society of what masculine and feminine energy is. And how you can think about it is masculine energy is intention, right? It's thinking, right? It's moving forward. It's growth oriented. It's data, right? The future, right? And then we have feminine energy, which is surrender, relax, let go, be in the moment, dance with life, the heart, the body, right? And there's a saying in the Gospel of Thomas, which is one of the old books that was found in the Egyptian tomb in 1942, of a saying from Jesus, which was, when the two become one, that's when we enter the kingdom of heaven. And this is kind of added on to it, when our thoughts and our feelings become one, that's when we enter the kingdom of heaven, right? So how do we practically use this? Knowing in the moment, when is the time for thinking and moving forward and intention, right? This is work mode, this is going, that sort of stuff, right? And when is the time for the surrender, the relax, the let go, the dance with life? And that's why we're such big proponents of energy rituals, because so much of our society is masculine, overthinking, and just blah, 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 go, 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 go all the time. But we can be more intentional with our life when we tap more into the surrender, the relax, the let go, the being in this moment, the setting new intentions, right? So throughout the day, I love working. I work really fucking hard, and I'm in the masculine. But I know every like 2 hours or so, my thoughts will be going all over the place, and I want to tap into the feminine and do a little bit of breath work and set new intentions for the next 2 hours, right? That's just one way of thinking about it. Energy work, masculine, feminine energies are just the energies of creation. So if you think about like any ancient religion, they have 3 things, right? The Father, Son, Holy Spirit, right? A lot of them are modeled off of spirituality, oneness, coming from unity, and then the masculine and the feminine, because the masculine and feminine bursts into the spirituality, right? And that's what most holy trinities in any religion are. It's spirituality, oneness, unity, and then a masculine element and a feminine element, which is pretty fascinating. But cool. I've got one more thing for you, or